August 21st, 1942. 4:40 a.m. The eastern edge of the Tenarú River Guadalcanal. The night is already sweating into morning. You can hear engines idling in the dark, low, uneven gasoline-fed murmurs that rise and fall as throttles are tested and released. Steel tracks creak as crews shift their weight inside cramped hulls. The air smells of damp jungle rot, fuel vapor, and hot metal. Somewhere behind the tree line, a single artillery piece coughs. Once then goes silent again, inside a Type 95. Hargo light tank. Sergeant Kobayashi Masao, Imperial Japanese Army, adjusts his goggles and taps twice on the shoulder of his driver. No words, no headset, no wire. The signal is enough. It always has been. Around him in the dark, other tanks answer with identical gestures. A raised arm, a clenched fist, a lantern, hooded then briefly uncovered. Flags folded and ready, even though the light is poor. The doctrine assumes daylight will come soon enough. Kobayashi is confident. He has reason to be. He fought in China, where armor advances were exercises in inevitability. Infantry flowed around tanks like water around stone. Resistance broke once steel appeared. Radios were unnecessary there. Commands were seen, not heard. The battlefield was something you watched, not something that talked back. Behind the tanks, infantry officers whisper final reminders. Keep formation, stay close, watch for friendly signals. If smoke appears, wait. If the lead tank halts, all halt. No improvisation. The plan is simple because it has always worked. American Marines are assumed to be tired, undertrained, spread thin along the perimeter near Henderson Field. Intelligence reports say their equipment is heavy, clumsy, slow to react. Tanks, if they have any, are believed to be few and mechanically unreliable. Japanese officers have read translated manuals describing American dependence on machinery. Too much metal, too many moving parts, too many systems that can fail, and most importantly, too much talking. The idea that American tank crews sit inside their machines with radios pressed to their ears is not alarming to Kobayashi or his superiors. If anything, it is faintly ridiculous. Talking wastes time. Signals are faster. Eyes do not need electricity. Flags do not fail when batteries die. This belief is not arrogance in the theatrical sense, it is institutional certainty. At 4:47 a.m., Lieutenant Ichiki Shoji, commander of the detachment supporting the assault, steps forward and raises his arm. The motion is smooth, practiced. Everyone sees it. Engines rise together. The Hargo lurches forward, suspension clattering softly as it leaves the palm-shaded staging area and noses toward the open sandbar near the river mouth. The tank's 37mm gun is forward elevation fixed. Ammunition racks are full. The crew is calm. No one is shouting. Kobayashi peers through his vision slit. He can see silhouettes of the other tanks moving in parallel, each one maintaining distance by eye alone. This is how it is supposed to look. Orderly, silent, controlled. What he cannot see, what no one on the Japanese side can hear, is what is happening 3 kilometers away. Inside an M3. Stuart light tank hull number, A-12, Corporal William. Red Henson, United States Marine Corps, adjusts his headset as a faint crackle fills his ears. The radio warms. The sound sharpens. Red 1. This is Blue 2. Movement confirmed. East of the river. Multiple contacts. The voice is calm, measured, already synchronized with others. Henson doesn't respond immediately. He glances at his driver, Private Frank Alvarez, then at the turret, where the gunner is already aligning the main gun by instinct. The radio does not replace their eyes, it layers on top of them. Blue 2. Red 1 copies, Henson says. Relay to battalion. We're moving to intercept. The engine note rises. The Stuart pivots smoothly, tracks biting into packed earth. Nearby, another tank moves at the same time, not because it saw Red 1 move, but because a different voice told it to. This difference, subtle, invisible, and still unrecognized, is already shaping what comes next. Back near the river, Kobayashi watches a runner move between infantry platoons, crouched low, carrying a message written on a scrap of paper. The runner stumbles, once recovers, disappears into brush. Communication is physical here. It has mass. It takes time. The sun is beginning to lighten the horizon. Pale gray bleeds into the black canopy. Soon flags will be visible. Soon commands will be clearer. Kobayashi believes the worst danger is confusion among his own infantry if tanks advance too fast. He slows slightly, matching pace. He does not know that on the other side, American tank commanders are already arguing by radio about whether to split flank or hold fire until identification is certain. Arguments that take seconds. Decisions that can be revised instantly. At 4:58 a.m., a Japanese tank commander raises a flag to signal a minor course correction. The fabric flutters weakly in the still air. 2 tanks see it, 1 does not. No one is worried. The plan remains intact. The assumptions remain unchallenged. The battlefield is quiet enough that confidence feels justified. For now. The light comes slowly filtered through jungle mist and smoke from last night's shelling. By 5:05 a.m., shapes are emerging. Palm trunks, sand ridges, the thin black line of the Tenarú River reflecting the sky. Japanese infantry fan out behind the tanks' rifles held low bayonets wrapped to keep them quiet. The rhythm of movement is deliberate, rehearsed. Inside the lead type, 95. Sergeant Kobayashi feels the ground change beneath the tracks. Sand gives way to firmer soil. He glances at his driver and lifts 2 fingers. Slow advance. The driver nods once. No words are exchanged. To Kobayashi, everything still fits the pattern he knows. The Americans have not fired. No artillery, no flares, no probing fire. This silence confirms what officers have been saying since the landing. The enemy is unprepared, nervous perhaps, but not organized. A young infantry lieutenant moves alongside the tank close enough to touch the armor with his left hand. He looks up, grins briefly, and gives a thumbs up. The tank is a talisman. Steel reassures flesh. What Kobayashi does not know is that the silence is intentional. Inside a shallow dugout near Henderson Field, Captain Charles W. Brush, United States Marine Corps, listens to overlapping radio traffic through a field receiver. Multiple units are reporting movement. Bearings are being corrected in real time. Someone is misreading a grid square and is corrected immediately. Another voice cuts in to confirm terrain features. No one raises their voice. No one panics. Brush keys his microphone. Armor section, hold position until visual confirmation. Do not advance past phase line Baker. The reply comes instantly. Roger, holding. This kind of restraint would have been unthinkable in Kobayashi's experience. When contact is expected, pressure must be applied quickly. Momentum decides outcomes. But here, momentum is being delayed on purpose. At 5:12 a.m., a Japanese reconnaissance element reports back to Lieutenant Ichiki using hand signals. They have spotted enemy wire. Defensive positions appear more organized than expected. Ichiki listens, nods, and dismisses the concern with a wave of his hand. Wire can be crossed. Trenches can be crushed. The tanks will lead. Ichiki has read after action reports from China that emphasize shock over finesse. Armor exists to break morale. Radios do not matter if the enemy collapses before coordination is required. Behind him, a signals officer hesitates, then steps forward. He gestures toward the horizon and traces a short line in the air, then taps his ear and shakes his head. It is an awkward attempt to convey something intangible. Noise. Voices. The sense that something unseen is active. Ichiki frowns, then turns away. There is no doctrine for responding to feelings. At 5:18 a.m., the first American artillery round lands. It is not close enough to hit anything. It does not need to be. The explosion is measured, corrected almost immediately by a second round that lands closer. Shrapnel tears through foliage. Dirt rains down on helmets. The sound arrives before the echo fades. Kobayashi feels the concussion through the hull. His instinct is to look for a flag. None appears. He peers through his slit, scanning for the signal that will tell him whether to halt or advance. There is a pause. Too long. Another round lands. Closer still. Japanese infantry officers shout verbal commands, now voices carrying through the trees. Sound replaces sight. Confusion creeps in not as fear, but as delay. Kobayashi raises his arm to signal a temporary halt. The tank to his right sees it. The one behind does not. Tracks grind unevenly. Spacing begins to distort. Across the field, American gunners adjust based on radio-fed coordinates. Corrections are shared instantly. The third salvo brackets the Japanese advance. In an American Stuart Corporal, Henson listens as a forward observer calls out ranges and bearings. The radio crackles, then steadies. Targets adjusting. Armor confirmed. Permission to engage when clear. Henson responds without hesitation. Copy. Standing by. He can hear other tank commanders breathing through their headsets. Not heavily, just present, a quiet network of men sharing the same picture without seeing the same view. At 5:24 a.m., Japanese tanks resume movement. Ichiki orders the advance to continue. Artillery alone will not stop them. He believes this firmly. What he does not account for is how quickly American units are now repositioning. Infantry squads shift sectors based on live updates. Anti-tank teams move to pre-selected points, not because they were ordered hours ago, but because someone just told them where the tanks are heading. Kobayashi notices something odd. The shell bursts are no longer random. They anticipate movement. When his tank edges left, the next explosion follows. He feels a flicker of unease, not fear, discomfort. He bangs twice on the hull to signal a change in speed. The driver responds, but the infantry is slower to adjust. Men stumble, formations compress. A runner is sent back to relay new instructions. The runner does not return. At 5:31 a.m.a. Japanese tank is hit, not destroyed. The shell glances off the armor, but the impact is violent enough to stun the crew. The tank slews sideways and blocks part of the advance. There is no immediate way to tell all units what has happened. Kobayashi sees the disabled tank and raises a clenched fist. Stop! Some see it, some do not. American radios carry a different message. Enemy armor stalled. Advancing left. Adjust fire. The reply is instant. This is the first moment when the assumptions begin to crack. Not because of losses, but because of tempo. The battlefield is moving at two different speeds. The Japanese are still reacting to what they see. The Americans are already reacting to what they have been told. 5:38 a.m. The sky over Guadalcanal has turned a dull silver gray. Visibility is improving by the minute, but clarity is deceptive. Smoke hangs low between the trees. Dust clings to sweat-soaked uniforms. Sound carries strangely muffled and directional at the same time. Sergeant Kobayashi feels the tank halt before he orders it. The driver brakes instinctively. Something is wrong ahead. Through the vision slit, Kobayashi sees movement that does not fit expectation. Not infantry, not artillery flashes. Steel, low silhouettes, American tanks. They are not where doctrine says they should be. They are not forming a single obvious line. They are spaced apart, angled differently. Some hull down, some already shifting position. And then he notices something more unsettling. They move almost simultaneously. One pivots left, another advances 10 meters. A third halts, not by visual signal. No flags, no runners, no delay. Kobayashi blinks and leans closer to the slit, as if proximity will explain what he is seeing. Inside the M3. Stuart Corporal William Henson hears the confirmation he has been waiting for. Visual contact confirmed. 3 Japanese light tanks, range 800 yards, bearing 080. The radio does not shout, it does not dramatize. It states fact. Henson keys his mic. Red 1 copies. Engaging on command. The gunner adjusts elevation. The turret rotates smoothly. The sound of the traverse motor is steady, almost comforting. No one speaks except through the radio. Fire when ready. The first American round cracks across the field. The recoil rocks the Stuart. The shell slams into the sand short of the target, kicking up debris that sprays across the Japanese advance. Kobayashi flinches as sand pelts the hull. This is different from artillery. This is direct fire. Intentional. He raises his arm to signal return fire. The problem becomes apparent immediately. The tank to his right sees the signal but has no clear line of sight. The tank behind him is partially masked by smoke. Infantry officers shout contradictory orders, some telling men to advance, others to take cover. Kobayashi shouts down into the hull, his voice sharp now. "Target front! Adjust!" The gunner slews the 37mm cannon toward the nearest Stuart. He fires. The Japanese shell strikes the American tank but fails to penetrate. Its sparks ricochets and disappears. Inside the Stuart, Henson hears the impact as a dull thud. He does not need to look. "Hit, but no penetration," the gunner reports calmly. Henson replies immediately. "Copy. Adjust fire. Aim lower hull." At the same time, 2 other American tanks receive the same update through their radios. No flags are raised. No one needs to see Henson's turret move. They already know what he knows. The second American shot hits true. It punches through the thin armor of a Type 95 and erupts inside the fighting compartment. Kobayashi sees the flash and feels the shockwave as the adjacent tank blooms with flame. The explosion is brief but final. The crew does not emerge. For a moment, time seems to hesitate. This is not how it is supposed to happen. Tanks are meant to absorb punishment, to inspire confidence simply by existing. They are not meant to vanish in a single controlled strike. Kobayashi signals halt again, this time violently. His arm aches with the effort. The Americans do not pause. Through the trees, Stuart tanks reposition with unsettling coordination. One reverses, while another advances into the gap. Infantry squads appear behind them, moving with confidence that suggests they know exactly where the tanks are going next. They do. Radio chatter continues. Red 1, Blue 2, repositioning. Covering your left. Roger. Holding. The words are short. Efficient. No wasted motion. Kobayashi feels a tightening in his chest that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with understanding that the enemy is not reacting. They are anticipating. He bangs on the hull, ordering the driver to advance and angle armor. The tank lurches forward. Another American round hits. This one penetrates the side of Kobayashi's tank, punching through storage racks and spraying metal fragments across the interior. The driver cries out. The engine sputters. Smoke fills the compartment. Kobayashi shouts for evacuation, but the noise is overwhelming. He kicks the hatch open and hauls himself out into the open air. What he sees is worse. Japanese tanks are no longer advancing together. Some are stalled. Some are backing up blindly. Infantry are scattered, unsure whether to follow armor or retreat into cover. American tanks, by contrast, are moving with purpose. One shifts to exploit a gap. Another halts to fire, then moves again without waiting for visual confirmation from anyone nearby. The battlefield feels alive with invisible threads connecting American units. Orders ripple outward instantly. Adjustments happen mid-motion. Kobayashi stumbles into a shell crater and presses himself against the earth. He watches as another Type 95 attempts to pivot only to be hit from a direction no one was watching. No signal had warned them. Because the warning did not need to be seen. At 5:46 a.m., Lieutenant Ichiki attempts to reassert control. He waves his arms, shouting commands, trying to re-establish formation. His voice is lost in gunfire and engine noise. A runner is sent with orders to pull back and regroup. The runner is cut down halfway. American radio traffic notes the shift immediately. Enemy armor losing cohesion. Press advantage. Henson hears it and feels a strange mix of focus and disbelief. The system is working exactly as trained. This is what the radios are for. For the Japanese, this is first contact not just with American tanks, but with a battlefield that speaks faster than flags can fly. And the realization is only beginning. 5:49 a.m. Smoke now dominates the low ground near the river. It curls around palm trunks and drifts in uneven sheets, sometimes thinning just enough to reveal wreckage, sometimes thickening into near blindness. The sounds overlap and blur, engines revving, metal grinding, short bursts of machine gun fire that begin and end without warning. Sergeant Kobayashi crawls away from his disabled tank helmet, lost face streaked with soot and blood. He presses himself flat as another American shell screams overhead and detonates behind him. The earth bucks. Fragments whip through leaves and flesh alike. He has not yet accepted that the advance has failed. He believes even now that this is a temporary disruption. That if the tanks can regroup, if infantry can close distance, momentum can be restored. This belief is reinforced by training, by doctrine, by everything he has learned about armored warfare. Nearby, a Japanese officer shouts for men to rally. His voice cracks with effort. A flag appears briefly raised above smoke and then dropped as gunfire snaps past. The problem is no longer simply firepower. It is time. Every Japanese decision now takes minutes. Every American decision takes seconds. Inside an American Stuart corporal, Henson wipes sweat from his eyes and leans closer to his headset. The radio is alive with updates. Red 1 Infantry reports enemy attempting regroup near tree line. Marking with smoke. Copy. Adjusting. The gunner rotates the turret before the smoke even appears. He trusts the voice more than his own eyes. When the smoke blooms, he is already aligned. Henson gives the order. The gun fires. The shell detonates among clustered figures who had believed themselves momentarily unseen. This is not cruelty. It is process. Japanese infantry recoil not because of casualties alone, but because the enemy seems to know where they are before they move. A lieutenant drops to one knee trying to make sense of the chaos. He scans for signals. He finds none that match what he is experiencing. At 5:54 a.m., Lieutenant Ichiki issues a verbal order to push forward aggressively, hoping speed will overwhelm coordination. The order passes unevenly. Some hear it, some mishear, some never receive it at all. One tank surges ahead alone. American radios catch it instantly. Single armor moving fast, bearing 095. Henson responds without looking away from the periscope. All units focus fire. 3 Stuarts engage within seconds. The Japanese tank is struck twice and erupts in flame before it reaches effective range. The escalation is now irreversible. Kobayashi watches the burning wreck and feels something shift inside him. Not fear, not panic. A hollowing realization that what is happening cannot be corrected with bravery or discipline. He tries to think tactically. The Americans must be coordinating somehow. He looks for signal flags. None. He looks for runners. None survive long enough to matter. Then he hears it. A faint, rhythmic crackle, almost lost under gunfire, almost mistaken for static. He turns his head toward an American tank just as its commander leans slightly, speaking into a microphone. The voice is calm, unstrained. Kobayashi does not understand the words, but he understands the act. They are talking inside the tank. The realization lands like a physical blow. This is not communication as he knows it. This is not command passed through layers of interpretation and delay. This is something immediate, intimate, continuous. For the first time, Kobayashi understands why the American tanks move as one, without looking at each other. At 5:58 a.m., Japanese artillery attempts to intervene, firing blind into suspected American positions. Without radio correction, the shells fall wide. Some land dangerously close to Japanese infantry. Confusion compounds. An infantry captain argues with a tank commander over whether to advance or pull back. The argument is shouted. It takes precious seconds. No one notices the American tank that has repositioned to their flank until it fires. The shot cuts the argument short. American combined arms coordination tightens. Infantry advance behind armor, guided by radio cues. Machine gun teams shift fields of fire based on spoken updates. No one waits for visual confirmation unless told to. The Japanese attempt a smoke screen to obscure movement. It succeeds briefly. Then American voices adjust. Smoke deployed. Shift thermal reference. Use muzzle flashes. The response is immediate. Fire resumes with deadly accuracy. Kobayashi retreats with a handful of infantry into a shallow depression. He can feel the ground vibrating as American tanks maneuver. He feels smaller now, not because of defeat, but because the battlefield itself has become too fast to read. At 6:05 a.m., Ichiki realizes his control is slipping. Orders are no longer shaping events. Events are overwhelming orders. He considers withdrawal but hesitates. To pull back now would admit something unthinkable, that the enemy is not just stronger, but fundamentally different. Another Japanese tank is hit attempting to cover the retreat. Its destruction blocks a narrow path, trapping men behind it. American radio traffic notes the bottleneck. Enemy, retreat, constrained. Opportunity to encircle, Henson acknowledges. His tank advances with others closing the gap. Kobayashi watches American tanks move into positions that anticipate Japanese reactions before they happen. He sees infantry falling back into zones already covered by fire. The escalation has revealed the misjudgment at the heart of everything. The Japanese believed coordination was about discipline and visibility. The Americans have made it about speed and shared awareness. At 6:11 a.m., the remaining Japanese armor is either destroyed or immobilized. Infantry scatter into the jungle leaderless and unsure. Kobayashi presses his forehead into the dirt and listens to the crackle of distant voices carried by American radios. He does not understand the language, but he understands the meaning. The battle is no longer something he can influence. It is something happening around him. 6:14 a.m. The jungle has fully awakened, but the sounds of birds and insects are drowned beneath engines and gunfire. Sunlight breaks through the canopy in sharp beams, illuminating wreckage in brutal clarity. Burned-out hulls lie half-buried in sand. Their paint blistered their silhouettes, unmistakable. Sergeant Kobayashi crawls along the edge of a shallow ravine, rifle clutched to his chest. Around him, infantrymen move without formation, each man reacting to immediate threats rather than orders. This is not retreat as trained. This is survival. Ahead, Lieutenant Ichiki has stopped moving. He stands upright behind a tree, binoculars pressed to his eyes, watching the battlefield with a rigid stillness that unsettles those nearby. He is no longer issuing commands. He is observing. What he sees cannot be corrected. American tanks are no longer merely reacting to Japanese movement. They are shaping it. Each burst of fire pushes survivors into pre-covered zones. Each attempted regroup is met with immediate suppression. The Americans are not guessing where the Japanese will go next. They already know. Ichiki lowers his binoculars slowly. His jaw tightens. The confidence that carried him through planning and advance is gone, replaced by something colder and far more dangerous to morale. Recognition. Nearby, an artillery officer approaches and waits for permission to speak. When Ichiki nods, the officer reports that ammunition is running low and fire direction is impossible without clearer targeting information. Runners cannot cross the open ground. Visual spotting is unreliable. Ichiki says nothing. Inside, an American Stuart Corporal, Henson, receives new instructions. Red 1 Battalion reports enemy command elements still active near ravine. Priority target. Coordinate with infantry. Henson acknowledges and adjusts course. The tank moves not toward where the Japanese are, but toward where they will need to go to escape. The turning point arrives not with a single explosion, but with a silence. At 6:21 a.m., Japanese fire slackens noticeably. Not because men have stopped fighting, but because coordination has collapsed beyond recovery. Isolated acts of bravery occur everywhere. A machine gun team fires until ammunition runs out. A tank crew attempts repairs under fire. None of it changes the shape of the battle. Kobayashi peers over the ravine and sees American infantry advancing in measured bounds, tanks providing overwatch. He watches one American sergeant pause mid-stride, press a hand to his headset, then redirect his squad 10 meters left without hesitation. There is no shouting, no confusion. The movement is smooth, confident, final. Kobayashi feels an impulse to stand and run forward, to charge, simply to do something that feels active. He resists it. The instinct is useless here. For the first time since the war began, he understands that courage alone does not determine outcomes. The enemy is not winning because they are braver or stronger. They are winning because they know more sooner. At 6:26 a.m., Ichiki finally speaks. He orders a withdrawal. The word ripples outward unevenly. Some units hear it, some do not. Some refuse to believe it applies to them. The order comes too late to be executed cleanly. American radios intercept the shift immediately. Enemy pulling back. Maintain pressure. Do not pursue blindly. Cut off escape routes. Henson hears the emphasis and nods to himself. This is discipline of a different kind. Aggression guided by restraint. As Japanese forces attempt to disengage, they find paths already blocked. Tanks appear at angles that defy expectation. Infantry fire erupts from positions that were empty moments ago. Kobayashi sees a familiar officer fall while trying to signal a change in direction with a flag. The cloth flutters once, then drops. No one responds to it. The flag no longer means anything. Smoke thickens again, but this time it does not conceal. It marks. American gunners adjust by sound, by radio cue, by shared awareness that transcends visibility. At 6:33 a.m., Ichiki is wounded. Shrapnel tears into his leg as he attempts to move between positions. He collapses, refusing assistance at first, then accepting it as pain and blood loss overwhelm him. His officers try to form a perimeter around him, but the effort is symbolic rather than effective. The command structure has fractured. Authority exists, but influence does not. Kobayashi finds himself kneeling beside a fallen comrade, pressing a bandage into a wound he knows is fatal. He feels strangely calm. The chaos has resolved into inevitability. He listens again and hears the radios. Not just from tanks, but from infantry. Voices overlapping, correcting, updating. The battlefield is saturated with information. For the Japanese, information moves at the speed of a man running. For the Americans, it moves at the speed of electricity. This is the moment no one on the Japanese side wants to name. Not yet. Not openly. But it has arrived all the same. The battle cannot be salvaged. The doctrine cannot be adjusted mid-fight. The assumptions that guided planning have been rendered irrelevant by something as simple and as devastating as a voice carried through a wire. At 6:40 a.m., Kobayashi looks back toward where the advance began. The ground is littered with the remains of machines he once trusted absolutely. They did not fail mechanically. They failed conceptually. He realizes that even if he survives this day, he will never again look at a battlefield the same way. The enemy has changed the rules without announcing it, and there is nothing left to do but endure what comes next. 6:43 a.m. Heat settles over the battlefield like a weight. The early morning breeze is gone. Smoke hangs heavy and unmoving, turning sunlight into a dull haze that stings the eyes. The sounds have changed. Fewer explosions, more sporadic gunfire. The violence is no longer a surge. It is a tightening grip. Sergeant Kobayashi moves with a small cluster of survivors through tangled undergrowth, each reminder of movement, risking detection. He is no longer thinking in terms of advance or retreat. He is thinking in fragments. Shade. Water. Silence. Behind him, a wounded corporal mutters prayers under his breath. Ahead, another man freezes suddenly, raising a hand, not as a signal, but as a reflex. Everyone drops. An American tank engine idles somewhere nearby. The sound is steady, controlled, unhurried. Kobayashi presses his face into the dirt and listens. He can hear voices now, not shouting, talking, calm, even conversational, punctuated by brief pauses and acknowledgments. The realization deepens. The enemy is not searching blindly. They are narrowing options. Lieutenant Ichiki is carried on an improvised stretcher several hundred meters away, blood soaking through bandages as officers argue over what to do next. One insists they must regroup deeper inland. Another argues for dispersal into the jungle. A third suggests attempting a night withdrawal, though night is hours away. No one mentions victory. The arguments take time. Each option requires coordination that no longer exists. Runners are dispatched, but none return with confirmation. Some do not return at all. Inside an American command post, Captain Brush listens to radio updates and marks positions on a map. He notes Japanese movement slowing, fragmenting. He orders caution. This is not a rout yet. It is a collapse in stages. Brush keys his microphone. Maintain spacing. Expect pockets of resistance. Do not outrun communications. The order is obeyed immediately. Tanks pause. Infantry halt. The entire American advance breathes as one. This synchronized restraint feels alien to Kobayashi when he glimpses it through foliage. He sees American soldiers waiting calmly behind armor, weapons ready, eyes scanning radios, murmuring quietly. Japanese soldiers nearby whisper urgently. They want to run. They want to fight. They want clarity. None arrives. At 6:52 a.m., a Japanese officer makes a desperate decision. He orders a small group to attempt a flanking charge against an American tank position, hoping speed and surprise will create an opening. The men rise and run. They are cut down within seconds by coordinated machine gun fire. The American tank does not even rotate its turret fully. Infantry fire does the work. American radio traffic notes the attempt. Contact neutralized, no further movement. Kobayashi watches the bodies fall and feels a surge of anger followed immediately by emptiness. The effort meant nothing. It changed nothing. He thinks back to training grounds in Japan, to instructors emphasizing visual clarity and obedience. He remembers being told that reliance on technology weakens the warrior spirit. That true command flows from presence and example. Here, presence is irrelevant. Example cannot travel fast enough. At 7 a.m., Japanese resistance fractures further. Small groups act independently. Some dig in, some scatter, some surrender silently when surrounded. Ichiki loses consciousness briefly. When he wakes, he asks for a report. No one can give him a coherent one. The battlefield no longer has a center. American forces adjust accordingly. Tanks reposition to block jungle exits. Infantry sweep methodically, guided by radio updates from spotters and tank commanders. Each movement is deliberate, measured, almost surgical. Kobayashi finds himself alone near a fallen palm, clutching his rifle with white-knuckled intensity. He considers firing at an American soldier visible through the haze. He does not. He knows what will follow. Immediate response. Accurate fire. No confusion. Shock has given way to comprehension, and comprehension has stripped away illusion. The Americans are not guessing. They are talking to each other constantly. At 7:08 a.m., Kobayashi hears a new sound. A whistle. Short, sharp, an American signal. He presses himself lower as infantry appear from two directions at once. They should not be coordinated. He cannot see how they are. But he hears the radios. One American corporal pauses behind a tree, presses his headset and gestures. Another squad adjusts course immediately. Kobayashi throws his rifle aside and raises his hands slowly. He does not shout. He does not signal. He simply stands. An American soldier steps forward. Weapon-trained eyes steady. He speaks briefly into his radio. Prisoner secured. The reply comes instantly. Copy. Proceed. As Kobayashi is led away, he looks back once more at the battlefield. He sees Japanese bodies scattered where signals failed. He sees American units moving with quiet efficiency, their coordination invisible but absolute. The shock is complete now, not emotional, intellectual. This is not defeat caused by numbers or firepower alone. It is defeat caused by a system that no longer functions against an enemy operating on a different plane. The desperate decisions have been made. They have all failed. What remains is the unraveling. 7:15 a.m. The battlefield no longer feels like a single place. It has fractured into isolated pockets of smoke, noise, and movement, each one disconnected from the others. What began as an organized advance has dissolved into scattered moments of resistance that flare briefly and then vanish. Japanese soldiers move without direction, now guided only by instinct and proximity. Some crawl deeper into the jungle, hoping foliage will protect them. Others cling to shallow cover, firing sporadically at sounds they cannot place. Orders no longer shape behavior. Circumstance does. Lieutenant Ichiki is conscious again, propped against a tree pane etched into his face. Blood loss has weakened him. His uniform is torn and stained. Officers crouch nearby, speaking in low voices that carry neither authority nor certainty. A captain reports that no tanks remain operational. Another confirms that radio silence from rear elements means nothing because there were never radios to begin with. Someone suggests consolidating survivors for a counterattack. No one explains how they would coordinate it. The original plan still exists on paper. In reality, it is already dead. American forces advance with caution now, not urgency. The radios crackle steadily, passing updates from unit to unit. Every movement is announced. Every pause is deliberate. Inside his tank, Corporal Henson listens as infantry report, clearing another pocket of resistance. He does not celebrate. He adjusts position as instructed and waits. This is what discipline looks like here. Not speed without thought, but control without hesitation. Japanese attempts at cohesion fail repeatedly. A lieutenant gathers a dozen men and tries to move toward higher ground. They are intercepted by American infantry, guided into position by a tank commander who never saw them, but was told exactly where they would be. Another group attempts to hide, believing stillness will make them invisible. A radio call brings mortar fire that forces them to scatter. The jungle that once promised concealment now feels like a trap. By 7:28 a.m., the collapse is undeniable. Survivors begin surrendering in small numbers. Some do so out of injury, others out of exhaustion. A few because they finally understand that movement only draws fire. Ichiki listens to reports until they become repetitive. Cut off, destroyed, missing. He closes his eyes and exhales slowly. The belief that carried him into this fight was simple. That courage, speed, and resolve would overcome material disadvantages. That the enemy's reliance on machines would slow them at critical moments. The opposite has happened. The machines have removed hesitation. Japanese soldiers nearby whisper among themselves, trying to piece together how the Americans knew where they were at every turn. Some speculate about aircraft overhead, others about hidden observers. None guess the truth fully. They cannot see the radios. American infantry move through the area where Japanese tanks once formed up. They step around burned hulks, noting thin armor, cramped interiors, the absence of communication equipment. The realization is practical rather than emotional. This explains everything. At 7:35 a.m., Captain Brush issues orders to cease aggressive pursuit. The enemy is broken. Continued pressure risks unnecessary casualties. The radios carry the command instantly. Units halt. Weapons remain trained, but movement stops. The battlefield quiets gradually. Japanese survivors emerge cautiously from cover hands, raised faces drawn. Others lie still where they fell. Kobayashi, now seated under guard, watches American soldiers move with the same coordination he saw in combat. They do not shout. They do not rush. They speak into radios, confirm positions, and proceed. The collapse is complete not because every Japanese soldier is dead or captured, but because the system that bound them together no longer exists. The original plan required synchronized movement without delay. It required visual signals to be seen and obeyed. It required a pace the enemy has made obsolete. Nothing remains to recover. 7:42 a.m. The smoke thins in places, revealing the true scale of the damage. Burned armor rests at odd angles, tracks, twisted turrets frozen where they last tried to aim. The ground is torn and uneven, marked by craters and the shallow scrapes of men who tried to dig with bare hands. The heat now presses down without mercy. Among the remaining Japanese officers, the instinct to act has not vanished. It has narrowed. They search for something to save. A position, a unit, a shred of order that can be claimed as a proof the force still exists. Lieutenant Ichiki, pale and weakened, insists on sitting upright. He demands a head count. The request is met with silence, then with estimates so vague they border on meaningless. No one can say who is missing and who is dead. No one can say where any intact group might still be operating. An officer suggests consolidating prisoners who escaped earlier encirclement. Another proposes forming a rear guard to cover a withdrawal deeper into the jungle. A third quietly asks whether any heavy weapons remain. Each idea dies as it is spoken. The problem is no longer tactical. It is informational. There is no way to know who is left where they are or whether orders would reach them before American units do. Across the field, American forces maintain their spacing. Radios continue to pass updates even as combat subsides. Infantry report sectors clear. Tanks confirm hull positions. Medics request and receive permission to move forward. This constant exchange does not slow now that fighting has eased. If anything, it becomes more precise. Sergeant Kobayashi watches from under guard as American soldiers establish a perimeter. He notes how even wounded men are accounted for quickly. Names are spoken into radios. Stretchers are directed to specific points. No one wanders. The contrast is unbearable. Japanese survivors who attempt to regroup are intercepted before they complete the effort. A pair of officers manage to gather 15 men near a dry creek bed. They whisper instructions, careful to stay low. An American radio call reaches a nearby infantry squad within seconds. Movement near creek bed. Grid confirmed. Proceed with caution. The squad advances and surrounds the group without firing a shot. The officers stare in disbelief as rifles appear from angles they thought hidden. The attempt ends quietly. At 7:55 a.m., Ichiki orders the destruction of remaining documents. Maps are torn, notes burned. It is a symbolic act meant to preserve dignity, if nothing else. The flames are small and brief. American units observe but do not interfere. They already know more than what the papers could reveal. Another Japanese officer suggests attempting to capture an American radio to understand how they are being coordinated. The idea is desperate and arrives too late. No unit remains capable of such an action. Kobayashi thinks of the inside of his tank of the empty space where a radio might have been. He had never questioned its absence. It was simply how things were done. Now he understands the cost. At 8:03 a.m., Ichiki requests water. It is brought by an aide whose hands shake as he holds the canteen. Ichiki drinks slowly, then asks one final question. How did they move so quickly? No one answers. The jungle around them is no longer a refuge. American patrols sweep methodically, guided by radio reports that stitch the terrain into a single coherent map. Each patrol knows where others are without seeing them. Each knows when to stop, when to wait, when to advance. Japanese soldiers who still resist do so in isolation. A lone machine gun fires briefly before being silenced. A rifle cracks from cover and then goes quiet forever. Attempts to recover the initiative collapse under the weight of certainty. The Americans are not improvising. They are executing a process refined through repetition and shared awareness. By 8:15 a.m., surrender becomes common. Hands rise hesitantly, then with growing resignation. Some men kneel, others remain standing, eyes fixed on the ground. Kobayashi is moved with other prisoners toward a collection point. He passes a wrecked Type 95 and pauses, briefly restrained by a guard's firm hand. He looks at the thin armor, the small gun, the cramped vision slits. The tank did not betray him. It was never meant to fight this kind of enemy. The recovery efforts end not with a formal decision, but with exhaustion. The Japanese force has no momentum left to recover. Every attempt is intercepted, anticipated, neutralized. At 8:22 a.m., Ichiki closes his eyes again. This time he does not reopen them. The effort to reclaim control has failed completely. Not because of a single mistake, but because the foundation on which control rested has been rendered obsolete. The radios continue to speak. 8:27 a.m. The gunfire has faded into the distance, replaced by isolated shots that echo briefly and then vanish. The battlefield is no longer active in the way it was an hour ago. It is settling like dust after a collapse, revealing what has already been decided. Sergeant Kobayashi sits on the ground among other prisoners, hands bound back straight despite exhaustion. Sweat runs into his eyes. He does not wipe it away. He watches. American soldiers move through the area with an air that is neither triumphant nor hurried. They check weapons, speak briefly into radios, receive short replies, and move on. The rhythm continues, even though resistance has largely ended. The system does not turn itself off. Nearby, an American tank idles engine, humming steadily. The commander stands half-exposed in the hatch, one hand resting on the rim, the other holding a microphone. He speaks casually, then listens. Kobayashi studies the scene with the intensity of a man who knows this understanding comes too late to change anything. This is the moment, not the moment of defeat. That came earlier. This is the moment of clarity. He understands now that what crushed the Japanese advance was not just superior armor or better gunnery. It was not even numbers. It was the collapse of relevance. Everything he was trained to do had functioned perfectly within a system that no longer mattered. Flags were seen. Signals were given. Runners were sent. Orders were obeyed when received. The problem was that by the time any of it arrived, the battlefield had already moved on. Across the field, Captain Brush stands with a map board headset pressed to one ear. He nods occasionally, marking notes. He has not raised his voice once since the fighting began. He does not need to. Information flows toward him without effort. Brush listens to a report confirming that no organized Japanese resistance remains east of the river. He acknowledges and issues instructions for consolidation and medical evacuation. The radios carry his words instantly, without distortion, without delay. Kobayashi watches an American medic jog toward a wounded Marine after receiving directions over the radio. The medic does not look around for guidance. He trusts the voice he heard more than his own eyes. That trust is absolute. Japanese officers nearby sit in silence, faces drawn. Some stare at the ground. Others watch the Americans with an intensity bordering on disbelief. They had believed that command required presence, that leadership required visibility. They were wrong. The realization spreads quietly among the prisoners. Men exchange glances, not words. They have all seen the same thing. They have all felt the same helplessness as American units appeared where they should not have been at moments that could not be explained by chance. A Japanese sergeant mutters softly that it was like fighting shadows that spoke to each other. No one contradicts him. Kobayashi remembers the first time he heard the crackle of an American radio clearly. He remembers how insignificant it seemed in that instant. Now he understands that sound was the battlefield itself speaking. At 8:41 a.m., American engineers move in to inspect destroyed Japanese tanks. They note armor thickness, gun caliber, crew layout. One points out the absence of any radio equipment inside the hulls. Another nods. The conclusion requires is no discussion. Kobayashi watches them peer into the burned interior of a Type 95 and feels an unexpected wave of shame. Not for losing, for not knowing. The moment of realization does not come with emotion. It comes with precision. He understands that even if the Japanese tanks had been thicker-skinned, even if their guns had penetrated more effectively, the outcome would have been the same. Without the ability to share information instantly, every advantage would have been isolated, temporary, and exploited before it could matter. This war is no longer about individual action. It is about networks. At 8:50 a.m., prisoners are moved again. As Kobayashi stands, he hears American radio traffic discussing perimeter adjustments, supply routes, and expected follow-on actions. The battle has already been folded into a larger plan. For the Japanese, the fight ended minutes ago. For the Americans, it has already become a reference point for what comes next. Kobayashi walks past the place where his tank died. He does not look away. He studies the wreck closely, committing it to memory. He realizes that the tank was never meant to operate alone, yet that is exactly how it had been forced to fight. He thinks of future battles, though he does not know their names yet. He imagines more tanks, more men, more courage. And he sees all of it rendered useless if nothing changes. This is the irreversible realization. The enemy did not simply outfight them, they outpaced them. And no amount of bravery can outrun a voice that travels faster than thought. 8:56 a.m. The sun is fully overhead now, merciless and white. What remains of the battlefield is quiet enough that individual sounds stand out. Boots on gravel, a tank engine shutting down. The distant call of a bird returning cautiously to a place that no longer feels alive. Sergeant Kobayashi is marched with other prisoners toward a temporary holding area near the riverbank. The ground is littered with debris left exactly where it fell: helmets, rifles, torn packs. Nothing is gathered yet. There is no urgency. The Americans know the fight is over. Behind them, American units establish final positions. Radios continue to murmur even now. Status reports, casualty counts, logistics. The network does not sleep simply because the shooting has stopped. Lieutenant Ichiki is dead. His body lies under a tarp not far from where he fell attended briefly and then left untouched. There is no ceremony, no final address. His death is not dramatic. It is simply another fact passed quietly through American radios and noted on a map. For the surviving Japanese officers, this absence is devastating. Leadership was meant to be visible. It was meant to inspire. Ichiki's stillness feels heavier than his commands ever did. Kobayashi is seated again, hands bound back straight. An American guard offers him water. He accepts it silently. The canteen is cool, real, unremarkable. He looks out over the field where the advance began. The path they took is clearly visible now, marked by wreckage and bodies. It is a straight line that ends abruptly in destruction. The consequences are no longer abstract. Japanese armor on Guadalcanal has ceased to exist as an effective force. The infantry who survive will fight on, but something fundamental has been exposed. Every future engagement will carry the memory of this morning. American officers move among the wrecked tanks, conferring quietly. One points at a burned hull and says something into his radio. The reply comes instantly. A note is made. The tank is tagged. Information is being preserved. Kobayashi realizes that the Americans will not forget this fight. They will dissect it, document it, integrate it. What was learned here will appear again, refined, multiplied. For the Japanese, there is no such mechanism. There will be reports, arguments, perhaps blame, but the core problem will remain untouched longer than it should. The radios changed everything, but acknowledging that requires admitting that long-held beliefs were wrong. At 9:14 a.m., prisoners are counted and divided. Names are written down. Ranks recorded. Kobayashi gives his name, unit, and rank. The American recording it speaks calmly, professionally, then passes the information along by radio. Kobayashi hears his own name repeated somewhere down the line, distorted slightly by static, then acknowledged. It is unsettling. His identity has already moved beyond his physical presence. Nearby, an American tank crew rests in the shade of their vehicle. Helmets are off. Faces are tired, but composed. One man laughs quietly at something said over the radio. Another wipes oil from his hands. They are already turning away from the battle, mentally folding it into routine. The final consequence settles over Kobayashi with crushing clarity. The Japanese army did not lose this fight because of inferior courage or lack of will. It lost because its way of seeing the battlefield no longer matched reality. It relied on eyes when ears had become more important. It trusted visibility when speed of information was decisive. This understanding arrives too late to matter for those who died this morning. By 9:30 a.m., the area is fully secured. American units begin preparing for expected counterattacks elsewhere. Radios carry warnings, plans, adjustments. The system expands outward, ready for the next engagement. Kobayashi watches as an American commander gives a brief spoken order into his microphone, then waits. Within seconds, tanks reposition, infantry adjust, and the landscape changes subtly but decisively. No flags are raised. No runners are sent. The battlefield obeys voices no one else can hear. For Kobayashi, the war will continue in captivity and memory, in the slow reconstruction of meaning after certainty has been stripped away. He will replay this morning, endlessly searching for a moment when a different decision might have mattered. There is none. The lesson was learned here, but not by those who needed it in time. The tanks are silent now. The radios are not.